Alright, let's talk camera basics, specifically the exposure triangle, what is it, and how can we use it to take great photos. Keep in mind, this also works for videos too. So, what is the exposure triangle? Well, it's made up of three things: aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. And these three things control how bright or dark your photo or video will be. So the first thing, arguably the most important thing, is aperture. Aperture controls how much light is let into your camera, and it's measured in f-stops. So you know, like the little numbers that say f2.8 and f3.5 at the bottom? Yeah, so that is f-stop. Aperture also affects background blur. The lower the aperture, the more background blur there will be, which is great for things like portraits. And a higher aperture means that more things will be in focus, which is good for things like landscapes. Thus, this is the first setting I change when adjusting for my exposure. So the next thing is shutter speed. This controls how fast the shutter opens and closes, or in other words, how fast or slow the camera takes the photo. The faster the shutter speed, the less motion blur there will be. For example, if you shoot sports, you'll probably want a higher shutter speed so that when you take the photo, your subject won't be blurry and it'll be nice and crisp. Generally for video though, you're probably not going to change this much because you want that natural motion blur, and will probably follow the 180-degree rule, which states that your shutter speed should be double whatever frame rate you shoot at. Now there are some exceptions to this, but I won't go over that in this video. Keep in mind though that for photos, the faster the shutter speed, the less light will be let into your camera. When the shutter opens and closes super fast, not a light will be let into the camera. So if you still want your image to be well exposed, make sure you drop that aperture or raise your ISO, which leads me to my next point. What is ISO? So ISO is the artificial light that the camera adds to your image to make it brighter. If after you adjust your shutter speed and aperture and your image is still too dark, you can raise the ISO to make the image more bright. This is similar to how the exposure slider works in Lightroom. However, you need to be careful though, because the higher you raise your ISO, the more noisy or grainy your image will be. Thus, this is always a last resort when adjusting for my image. If you want an exact number, I wouldn't go over 3200, but generally keep this number as low as possible. So with all this in mind, how do we actually use this information to get great photos? Well, I'm going to show you an example. All right, in this example, we have a very underexposed image. So what I'm going to do first is lower the aperture. So that's the first thing we'll do. And mine goes down to as low as 2.8. And now we're going to go and adjust the shutter speed. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust it to 1/50th, because that is what I'm filming at 24 frames per second, and double that. It's 1/50th. And you can still see it's a tad bit underexposed. So what we're going to do is adjust the ISO, and then we're just going to raise it until it looks right. So you can see there it is, and there's the perfect exposure. Well, hopefully you learned something new about how you can expose for your images properly. If you have any further questions, please let me know, and I'll see you in the next one.